All right, so we're back again for another top five. This week's top five is top five cars we'd want to see as continuation cars. Any idea what a continuation car is, Miles?
No, actually, before you mentioned this the other day, I'd never heard the term before. So what is a continuation car?
Yeah, I think it's a relatively new term, and I think where the term came about was Jaguar actually introduced it. So Jaguar produced the XK in the 50s. They were going to make 16 of these cars, and they only ended up making 7. There was a fire in the factory, unfortunately, and the other 9 were basically burned. So Jaguar wants to continue building an additional 9 to finish out the series that they intended.
Okay.
So I think in its most purest form right now, a continuation series is, the original car manufacturer continuing the production of a series of cars that they intended, and continuing the vehicle identification numbers too.
Got it.
So with that said, the first car that I had come up with, and Miles, you're well aware of Austin Healey, right?
Sure, yeah.
I mean,
from Britain.
Yeah,
it's in the
better. So the Austin Healey 3000, I would like to see as a continuation car, but the Austin Healey 100 was named 100 because it did 100 miles an hour. So I'm assuming that the Austin Healey 3000 went 3,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, by their own logic, right? That must be.
Right. But actually they named it the 3000 because it had a 2.9 liter engine.
Oh.
Not a 3 liter engine.
That kind of, I guess, made sense to them at the time. That's kind of weird.
Yeah. The car weighs 2,600 pounds, and it was built between 1959 and 1967. And I love the two-tone cars that I've seen, either on the road or at concourses or car shows. I think those look really good too. So.
Right. Interesting. All right. Well, for my first car, first of all, Walter, I have to fess up here. I have to admit something. So I pick cars that already are continuation cars because I don't want to pick cars that and then realize that they're never going to see the light of day again. I want to know that this is a car I can still go out and buy. So
if you can afford it.
If I can afford it, that being the key thing. But we didn't set a budget for this, so I think we're okay. So the first of my cars, and I know you're going to scoff at this car, but I don't care. I'm going to talk about it anyway. The first of the cars is the Avanti 2. I don't know if you know about this car, Walter. So this was based off of the Studebaker Avanti, which is a car from the early 1960s. And I know people either love this car or they hate it. And I have a feeling you probably hate it.
You are correct about that.
I won't say it goes so far as to say I love it, but I think it's a really interesting car. So this car was way ahead of its time when it was released back in 1961. It was only made for a couple of years, and they made less than 6,000 of them. Unfortunately, some fit and finish issues and just some lack of demand kind of killed it prematurely. But after the car ceased production, the name and the tooling and several other things were sold to a couple of guys in South Bend, Indiana, and they continued building this car they dropped the Studebaker part because obviously they didn't own the rights to that, but they continued making the car as the Avanti 2 for a number of years. And actually this car was being made up until 2006. They made very few changes to it. The company changed hands a few times, but it became kind of a bit of a cult hit.
So my next car I came up with, Miles, is the Maserati 3500 GT. So this car was manufactured between 57 and 64. The weight is 3,100 pounds, 3.5 liter engine, 232 horsepower, 6-cylinder. Yeah, I think if Maserati came out with that today as a continuation series, it would be a big hit.
All right, so my second choice is the Singer 911. Walter, I don't know if you know about Singer. They're a company based here in California that produce custom-built 911s based on the original Porsche 911. What they do is you give them a donor car. They usually take the cars from the early 90s because they were the last of the air-cooled engines, and they were considered to be the most refined of the air-cooled engine before Porsche switched to water-cooled. And they take this car and they completely strip it down. They rebuild the engine. They strip it down to the bare bones of it, and they reinforce the shell. They build custom carbon fiber body panels, except for the doors, which need to be steel for safety reasons. And they build a custom interior. And I think these cars are stunningly gorgeous. The build quality on them is amazing. The colors, the paint job, interiors, I think they're absolutely beautiful. And they have a price tag to match as well, but if you can afford it.
All right, Miles. Well, my next car I came up with was a classic that I think you are going to agree with me 100%. So I thought that the Porsche 550 Spider would be the perfect continuation car.
Okay.
So, you know, this had 110 horsepower, 4-cylinder engine made between 1953 and 56. There were hard tops and convertibles. James Dean was probably one of the most famous people who owned one. Unfortunately, he died in one too. So, you know, I'd love to see the 550 Spider.
All right, so my next car here, the Lancia Stratos, I think it's just a beautiful car. I think it's gorgeous. I think there's just something about that design that is so well balanced. It looks, it's a very small car actually, but it looks like it's going really fast when it's standing still. It had a really amazing rally heritage. It won the World Rally Championships 3 years in a row, you know, it just became renowned for that success. Only about 500 of them were originally made. And it was designed by Bertoni, who, you know, if you go online and look at the list of cars that Bertoni designed in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I mean, just some of the all-time greats, especially Italian cars.
All right, so for my next car, Miles, it's another British car. It's the Jaguar XK120.
Oh, beautiful.
So this car was launched in 1948 at the London Motor Show, and it was a huge sensation. So Jaguar decided to build the car. The first 242 were actually wood frame over aluminum skin.
Wow.
And they went on to produce steel bodies. So do you know why they named it the XK120, Miles?
I think it was because that was the 120 miles an hour was the top speed of the car, right?
No, it was because it came out with 120 problems.
Oh, well, it is a British car from the 1940s, so that makes sense.
That's right. But no, you're right. It was a top speed of 120, and I think it set a world land speed record.
Yeah, that car came out 3 years after the end of the Second World War in Britain. You know, and the country was rebuilding. So you know, to produce something like that in those days, I think was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so my next car, Walter, is also a British car. It's the Aston Martin DB4 GT Zagato Sanction 2. So this is, I think actually, is the definition of a continuation car. This is based on the 1960s Aston Martin DB4 GT Zagato. They were only made about 20 of these. They were going to build 25, but they only ended up building 20. And it was based on the original Aston Martin DB4 GT, and they sent it to Zagato, a company in Italy, who lightened up the car, improved the handling and the engineering. It was kind of almost like an AMG or an M-Works of the day. And so they basically improved the car, and these cars are, you know, priceless today. I mean, like I said, there's only 20 of them. Well, what happened was in the late 1980s, Aston Martin had 4 unutilized chassis from the original run, and they decided to turn these into GT Zagato. So they took the original chassis, they upgraded them into the GT model, and then they sent them back to the Zagato factory in Italy, and Zagato actually rebuilt these cars into the original Zagato from the original spec. And the way they were able to do that was they actually went out and got an original Zagato and took it apart.
Wow.
So they could figure out how it did. I mean, can you imagine, you know, being the owner, like, yeah, sure, take my car, you can take it apart, you know. And so they called them the Sanction 2 to designate them from the originals. An original car that the original company went back and continued building. Pretty amazing.
That is amazing. All right, so my final continuation car, Miles, it's a modern car actually.
Okay.
I think they just didn't build enough of them, and I think they need to build more of them.
Okay.
That would be the Porsche Cayman GT4.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I would agree with you.
So 385 horsepower, 3,000 pounds, 6-cylinder. I think they built about 1,000 of them. Yeah, I don't know why, you know, we talked about this in one of the segments, I think it was the news segments,
right.
Why they didn't build 5,000 of them, 10,000 of them.
Right,
you know?
right.
Especially the 6-cylinder. Now all of the, you know, Porsches, the Porsche Boxsters and the Caymans are all 4-cylinders, so
right.
you know, it'd be nice to see them do another continuation. But hopefully, you know, we even talked about the Cayman GT4 RS. You know,
Right.
maybe that will come out, and maybe that'll have a 6-cylinder.
All right, so my last car here, Walter, again, I have a feeling you're going to scoff at this one because I know how much you love to scoff. It's not the Ferrari FF, because I know you hate that car, but it is a car that's very close to my own heart from my childhood. It's the Delorean DMC12. Basically, this car was made for a couple of years in the early 1980s. They produced about 9,000 of them. The company went bankrupt, but there were a lot of parts for the car that were never made into cars, and they were bought by a couple of companies, and over the years changed hands. And you know, I'm not talking spark plugs and floor mats. I'm talking, you know, doors, body panels, you know, unibodies, engines, everything you need to make a car. And finally, in 1997, a company was founded called the DeLorean Motor Company of Texas, and this company bought all these parts, and they started building DeLoreans again. Essentially, it's like putting together an IKEA table. You know, they just took the doors and the engines and they bolted it all together again. But one of the interesting things about this was because these parts were originally from 1981 and 1982, the VIN numbers were original VIN numbers. So these cars are considered original 1980s DeLoreans. They've just been assembled, you know, 20, 30 years later. All right, guys, well, that is our top 5 continuation cars. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any ideas for future top 5 videos, be sure to comment below, and as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to see plenty more, and we'll be back again soon with more top 5 and other kinds of videos as well. Until then, see you then.
Take care, car lovers.